On the dot. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, I just want to check quickly whether the recording is on, as well as the YouTube streaming.
Yes, Chair, we're ready. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Colleagues, thank you for joining me today. Today we are dealing with the Division of Revenue Bill, Bill 6, 2022 from the NCOP. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm chairperson for this committee. Colleagues, I'm going to ask that you introduce yourselves, please, and then I'm going to ask that the National Treasury introduce themselves, as well as our permanent delegate if he's present. Colleagues, we will then, after that, we will jump straight into the briefing. This will be followed by a public hearing. This will allow persons from the public to make either oral or written submissions. We will then have a short break for political parties just to consider their view, and then we will have the consideration of the negotiating mandate. I see the first members already up. You may introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairperson Ricardo Mackenzie.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chairperson Khalil Barankais.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, Chairperson Kilian Postman.
Thank you so much.
Morning, Chairperson.
Morning, Chairperson. This is Member Nomin Kondlo.
Thank you so much. I think I had Member Mvimbi and Kondlo at the same time there. I don't see any other members in the meeting. If National Treasury and the permanent delegate, if present, can just introduce themselves, please.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is Amkela Nitaba. I am from the National Treasury. I am with my colleagues from the National Treasury as well, who will be presenting with me. I will ask them to present, to introduce themselves. It's Ditsipa, Kolisang, and Preeti. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, honorable members. Litse Papakis, the director responsible for the local government fiscal framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Good morning, honorable members. I'm Kodisa Mutukanele from National Treasury, working in the Local Government Finance Policy Unit. Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Good morning, Chair and honorable members. My name is Priti Mawungu, also from the National Treasury. I'm responsible for monitoring conditional grants. Thanks.
Morning. Welcome back as well. Anyone else? I see these Provincial Treasury people also online. If you could just introduce yourselves, please.
Good morning, Chairperson and members. Malcolm Boysen from Western Cape Provincial Treasury.
Welcome.
Good morning, Claire Horton, Provincial Treasury.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Colleagues, without further ado, you know the drill on the division of revenue. Let's jump straight into the presentation. I'm just going to put my video off. I had load shedding this morning, so my connectivity coming back online hasn't been fantastic this morning. Thank you so much. Who from National Treasury will be doing the presentation for us?
I'll be starting the presentation, but we'll be sharing the presentation with my colleagues.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Litsipa, could you please fly to the presentation?
Is it visible from your side?
Yes, it is, but if you could make it on a slideshow, please. Thanks, Litsipa. Thank you, and I would like to say good morning again to all the honorable members and our colleagues. Yes, I'm going to be taking you through the presentation. So the presentation is outlined as follows. We have an overview of the presentation as firstly, an overview of the 2022 Division of Revenue, and which will also include the changes to the bill. This is the part that I will I will present first. My colleague Kolisang will then present to you the provincial government allocations, and then also give some updates on the provincial equitable share. He shared some updates on the changes that have been made there. The last part is the local government presentation, which Priti will do for us. The presentation also, as normal, we include annexures for your information, which this time includes the FFC recommendation, the responses to the committee, and then the detail of allocations. Thanks. Next slide. So in terms of the 2022 Division of Revenue, we'll see that there has been an increase in the share of provinces. If you check the Division of Revenue in total, there we have about 1.8 trillion, which grows to about 2.09 trillion, which is a total growth of about 3.4. But if you look at the national share, it reduces by 1%. It only has a growth of a negative 1% there. Which grows from 800, which reduces from 831 billion to about 805 in the 2024-25 financial year. On the provinces side, there's a slight growth, but also not as huge because of the budget consolidation. You will see that in 2021, the budget grows, moves from a base of 661 billion to 690 billion point two in 2024-25. The local government actually is the one that will have the biggest increase, mainly as a result of the higher inflation in the equitable share. So you'll see that their share, their budget will grow from 135.3 in the 2021-22 financial year, and then it grows to about 170.1 in 2024-25. So I think this is I think some of the members will welcome this because there's always, there's concern that the local government does not get enough support in terms of the fiscals. So we're already seeing that the budget favors the local government and then the provincial government. Thanks. In terms of the division of revenue, you'll see that it is also highly redistributive. So it does favor mostly rural provinces than provinces that have more urban areas. So for instance, if you're looking at the graph on your left, which shows the per capita allocation to provinces for 2022-23, you will see that provinces like Gauteng, per capita, they get 7.6 for the average equitable share, while they get 1.7 for the average conditional grant. But then if you go to provinces like Northern Cape, the share increases to 11.5, the Eastern Cape 10.5, and so and then the Western Cape also, because it's mostly urban area, it also reduces to 8.2. So I think that we still see the division of revenue being useful in favoring mostly the poor and the rural areas. In terms of the annual allocations to the spheres, the local government has been growing at a much higher rate than other spheres, receiving generous increases related to national. For the most part, the national government has been receiving at least the least increases in the negative. I think this also is a graph that shows the trend of the numbers that I was talking about in the initial slide, where we were seeing that the growth in the budget in the national sphere has actually been negative when it's compared to the local government. So you see the declines from 2019-20 that are attributed to the fiscal consolidation measures that we have been undertaking since it was introduced in the 2019 MTF. So the budget doesn't look very nice, especially for the national government, because you see it's been going over the years. I think this one is going to be an interesting slide for the members, because with the COVID, we've been expecting that the municipalities would actually be underperforming in terms of revenue collection. But this graph actually shows that revenue collection has been increasing gradually since 2015-16, and this trend has continued even after the COVID in 2021. So due to the pandemic, the revenue collection remains similar to previous years. If you're looking at 2015 in the graph on your right, it's showing you your graph from 2015-16 until 2020-21. You will see that the collection over the months in all these years is actually similar. There's no substantial decrease or increase with the revenue. So the trend in revenue collection has actually remained the same during the COVID pandemic as before. I think this is important because it gives you an idea of whether, in terms of the division of revenue, are we making enough provision to support municipalities during the pandemic, or it's not. So we are expecting, because of the municipal revenue collection not severely impacted, that even the changes in the division of revenue should not be substantial. With regards to the substantive changes to the bill, sorry about that. I will ask my colleague Litsipa to give you the details with regards to the changes. Litsipa, if you can take over.
Thanks very much, Amo. Good morning again, honorable members. Yeah, I'm on full screen here, so I can't tell whether you can see me or can hear me. This slide is really the product of extensive consultation with the provinces and sector departments, wherein around July, we started the process where we send communication to each of the institutions, asking that if they have any proposals in terms of the changes that they would want to see, which would aid service delivery, then they had an opportunity to do that. And we did that twice to give them an opportunity to help us improve what one would then call the rules of the game. And these are really the substantive changes really that emanated from that process. And I think the first one really is not so substantial in that, but it does provide clarity in terms of the expectation. So this clarity is with regards to Section 6, Section 3, in as far as it talks to the additional allocation to provinces and municipalities. So here we're just clarifying that actually, this comes from excess revenues, but just not from the national government's equitable share, as would have been implied before. The second one really, I think, is one that could really be a game changer in that it was already allowed for in terms of the appropriation bill. But what it does really is that it allows for additional funds to then be, spent before the bill has been enacted. The amendment bill has been enacted, and there are some criteria that, of course, would need to be met, especially with regards to expenditure that cannot be delayed. And that expenditure would have been announced by the minister when he tables his speech. It was already part of the contingency reserves. Therefore, for instance, I think a good example of that is the presidential employment program. Those initiatives, they are announced, they are already part and parcel of the fiscal framework, but it's just that there is no perhaps allocation per province or municipality at the time of the budget. Now, with this new clause, we are in a position to then, gazette the said allocations to these spheres, and then those the subnational spheres of government then would then be in a position to start spending funds, which gives them more time really to spend the funds, because what we learned was that it takes a bit of time for the bill to then go through all its legislative processes for allocations really that have already been approved through the process that we're engaging the members of this legislature on now. And as a result of this change, it really touches on quite a number of other sections as well, because there's also Section 7, which related to the conditional grants that go to provinces. So in cases where these additional funds are flowing through the grants system, and then there's Section 8, which touches on local government a conditional grant as well. So we do see this as something that would really, really assist in ensuring that the subnational spheres of government have more time to spend in them. The other change really is also one that has really, I think, the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy has really struggled with the treatment of Eskom. Here the issue is Eskom is an institution of government, therefore it's also regulated under the PFMA. However, the funding, the conditional grant that flows to them is that of division of revenue in nature. So some of the provisions were not there, were covered in the PFMA, but the PFMA was not so specific in terms of what can happen. How then can we recoup funds, for instance, in an instance where Eskom has not spent the funds by the end of the financial year? What then happens when Eskom is behind in terms of its spending? So all those provisions now have been clearly articulated here, wherein we are giving the power now to the DMRE with Treasury's concurrence, of course, where they can then withhold when necessary and also reallocate the funds from that particular grants. And this extends also to the water boards, really. Yeah. The last one, honorable members, thanks, Chairperson, is that in terms of the processes that the provinces will then undertake, there was a complaint that they sometimes do not take into account the timelines that your municipalities or schools or hospitals would have. So in a case where, for instance, a province would delay in terms of gazetting the allocations that flow to those organs of state, and by the time they have to table their budgets, they wouldn't have had a sufficient time to really engage on those particular allocations. So here really we're making a specific requirement that the provinces will then need to gazette at least by the 15th of June on allocations that impact on municipalities, so that municipalities are able to factor those in before they can finalize their budgets for the next financial year. Thank you so much, honorable members, and for the opportunity.
Thanks, Letiba. Can I ask Kolisang to continue with the provincial government allocations?
Thank you and good morning once again. So the first few slides with regards to the provincial side of the presentation will focus on the update on the provincial equitable share. As members do know, the equitable share is currently being reviewed in conjunction with the 9 provincial treasuries, as well as the FFC and sector departments, where changes are made to the formula will be phased in while the review is being carried out. So for this round of the review, we took a deep dive into the health component of the equitable share. And just to give a background to the members, the health component is broken down to 2 major components, which is the risk profile, which basically determines the risk profile of the population as well as the patient load data. And the risk profile accounts for 75% of the component, while the patient load data accounts for 25%. So in this round of the review, we focused on the risk profile, and we reviewed the risk-adjusted index that is used to account for the risk profile of each province in the health component. Next slide, please. So this slide just gives you the process that was undertaken. So the technical work started in 2019 and carried through over to 2020 to redesign the risk-adjusted index. And the process entailed reviewing variables that currently inform the risk profile and redesigning the index with more variables that are suitable to inform the index. And following the completion of the technical work, National Treasury held a workshop with provincial treasuries, National Department of Health, as well as provincial health departments and other health experts experts to workshop the new risk-adjusted index. And the final redesigned adjusted index incorporated changes and suggestions that were made at that workshop. Next slide, please. So this just gives the breakdown of the new risk-adjusted index. If you look at the diagram on the, or the two diagrams on the right, give you an idea of what was added. So the old risk-adjusted index just had 3 subcomponents to it, which focused on age and sex, HIV, and maternity. We have increased these variables in the new index to include total fertility rate, premature mortality, sparsity, and multiple deprivation index, and they've all been weighted to come up to 100%. So just going through some of the changes that were made, the age and sex subcomponent really measures the relative resource requirements of healthcare by age and sex, and this remains the same as it's the most important variable. We've added the total fertility rate, which considers the additional burden of providing healthcare to pregnant women. And although the maternity rate, maternity subcomponent was there, this new component actually measures the amount of times a woman is expected to give birth in a lifetime. We've also included the premature mortality because in the old index, we only had HIV as a mortality indicator or proxy, but now we have a more detailed premature mortality and subcomponent that takes into consideration other burdens of diseases, including HIV. Then we have the sparsity subcomponent because, as we all know, that it's cost more to provide services in sparse areas. So we've included that in the as a subcomponent. And we also have included the multiple deprivation index, which captures the differences in the socioeconomic determinants of health needs between provinces. And the combination of these variables will form the risk-adjusted index, and it's been included in the 2022 PES formula, sorry about that. And the changes as per the principle that we have adopted in the equitable share review, any change will be phased in over 3 years just to minimize the impacts. Next slide, please. Over and above that, we have updated the equitable share with technical updates. The formula has been updated with the most recent data available. But with regards to insured population, given that the general household survey was only published after the equitable share was, if you can go back, thanks. Given that the general household survey was published only after the equitable share formula was determined, we used the 2019 general household survey to update the health component. The output subcomponents, this year we had some issues where we had noticed some data gaps in the information that was submitted by hospitals and primary clinics, and the hospital, the data that was subsequently given to us by NDOH had some data gaps in it. So after consultation with the department, we had resolved to use the 2021 data that we had used last year to update the demand component of the health component. And the rest of the formula was updated with Lurid's enrollment data for the education component, mid-year population, the latest mid-year population estimates, the income and expenditure survey data, as well as the regional GDP data for the economic component. So this slide just shows the provincial transfers for the 2022 MTEF. As members know, provinces are largely dependent on transfers, and the table on your left just shows that in total, provinces will be getting 682 billion for this year. And the equitable share will grow at an annual average rate of about 1%, whilst conditional grants grow about 3.3%. And the 1% is largely due to once-off allocations that have been included in the PES. But if you take out those once-off allocations, the equitable share actually grows about 2% over the MTEF. Also, some of the reasons why the equitable share grows at a low rate is obviously fiscal consolidation measures, which my colleague Amukelani has already alluded to earlier in the presentation. And funds have been added to the provincial transfers to respond to existing spending pressures, the continuation of the Presidential Employment Initiative, as well as once-off gratuities. Next slide, please. Thank you. And these are some of the changes that were, or changes to the provincial equitable share of allocations added. The first addition to the equitable share was the 14.7 billion rand that was set aside for provinces to fund the carry-through costs of the cash gratuity in the event of no new wage agreement. Of this 14.7 billion, 13.9 has been added to the equitable share, while the remainder is added to conditional grants. For the continuation of the Presidential Employment Initiative, 12.7 billion has been added to provincial allocations for the first 2 years of the MTEF, and these funds will be added to the education sector to hire more educators and assistants at schools. Additional funds were also added to the provincial equitable share to accommodate other spending pressures. So 24.6 billion was added to the education sector to address shortages of teachers and learning materials. 15.6 billion was added to fund COVID responses and to reduce the effect of reductions on essential medical goods and services, as well as 988 million was added to ensure that the social welfare budget grows by inflation. Changes made to conditional grants. So the first change was in the education sector. As colleagues or members may know, in the 2019 State of the Nation address, the President announced that the Early Childhood Development Program will be moved to the Department of Basic Education. And this has been, after the process was taken, this has been largely effected. So the Early Childhood Development Grant will be moved from the Department of Social Development to the Department of Basic Education. Within the corporate governance sector, the name of the Provincial Disaster Relief Grant will change to Provincial Disaster Response. And the main aim of this is that the change aligns to the existing NDMC processes in responding to disasters that have occurred. Within the health sector, the District Health Program Grant, which was known as the HIV, AIDS, TB, Malaria and Community Outreach Grant, has been restructured over the 2022 MTEF. The grant will now have two components, being comprehensive HIV and AIDS component, as well as the district health component. And the mental and health services component of which was previously in the indirect component of the National Health Grant, it will now be moved to the direct National Health Insurance Grant. Furthermore, 1 billion has been added to this grant, to the District Health Programs Grant to support provinces in the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. Next slide, please. Still within the health sector, the mental health services and ecology services component in the indirect National Health Insurance Grant will be shifted to the direct health insurance grant. And to address a shortfall of medical internships and community services posts, a total of 4 billion has been made available for the Human Resources and Training Grant. And this comprises of 745 million, which was reprioritized from the indirect National Health Insurance Grant and the Health Facility Revitalization Grant, as well as 3.3 billion, which was added as part of the spending pressures that were identified in the sector. Within the transport sector, due to delays in developing clear and objective criteria to allocate incentive components in the PRMG, the allocation will be removed from the grant for this year, for 2023. And part of that will be made 15 million for 2023 and 20 million for 2023-24, and 30 million for the outer year will be reprioritized from the PRMG to the Department of Transport to fund a system that we used to centralize data collection, which will ultimately assist in providing the incentives that are needed. So changes to provincial grants, as said, to make provision for the once-off cash gratuity, 14.7 billion was added to the provincial allocations, and of this 14.7 billion, 809 million has been added to several conditional grants, which are shown in the table on your right. Further to this, for disaster funding,
To change to rural flex, but the agreement was only
Colleagues, please
certain,
mute yourselves. Ms. Davids, please mute yourself. Thank you. Mr. Molokanela, you can continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. For disaster funding, we have made provision for the first 2 years of the 2022 MTEF. Funds have been set aside in order to support KZN with the costs associated with repairing and damaging of public infrastructure, given the disaster that happened in 2019. So just the sub-bullets, they just show how much is from each grant. So the Human Settlements Development Grant, 398 million will be reprioritized in 2023 with 475 million in 2023-24. Within the Education Infrastructure Fund, 145 million will be reprioritized in 2023 and 326 million in 2023-24. And within the road sector, the PRMG will be reprioritized with 490 million in 2022, leading up to 294 million in 2023-24. So this slide, colleagues, members, just gives the corrections that we have made to grant frameworks. So the first correction was within the district health programs grant. And just this correction is just correcting where the overarching framework for the district health program grant indicated that the targeting for the HPV vaccination program to be grade 7 schoolgirls, whilst the framework for the HPV vaccination program actually starts the targeting from grade 5 girls. So we were just making a correction for that, the two different targeting of the schoolgirls in public schools. So the error does not affect the allocations per province. However, it did create confusion on the targeted grade for the HPV program in schools. The second error that was rectified was with the EPWP integrated grant for provinces, where it was noted that 53 FTEs will be targeted for Northern Cape, and it was rectified that it's actually 2,361 FTEs. And this correction does not affect any allocations. We're just making a correction for the correct FTEs that should be targeted. National Treasury has requested the Standing and Select Committees on Appropriations to recommend that the conditional grant frameworks and the PWP targets be corrected as part of the Gazette that will be issued in terms of Section 15 of the bill once it's been enacted. The next two slides just gives a breakdown of the allocations for the Western Cape Provincial Government, and I'm sure our colleagues from the Provincial Treasury are aware of this, as we have already sent through the allocation letters to them. So yeah, so it just gives a breakdown per grant and for the equitable share. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kolisang Pretty. Could you please take over the local government presentation?
Thanks, Amu, and good morning once more, members. In terms of the local government transfer for the 2022 MTEF, transfers to local government account for 9.8% of the national raised revenue. This is because municipalities are able to raise their own revenues. However, as my colleague alluded earlier, municipalities are unique, with pure municipality receiving most of their revenue from transfers, and while urban municipality raise majority of their end revenues. Over the 2022 MTEF period, 481.3 billion will be transferred to local government, and a further 25.4 billion has been allocated to indirect grant. And lastly, the local government equitable share grows at a faster rate at an annual average of 10.3% over the MTF. Next slide, please. With regards to the local government equitable share formula, this is to ensure fairness and also equity across all municipalities, hence the formula. The formula is updated every year to account for the different growth rates mentioned below. That the household growth with 2.7 growth in the stats 2022 growth household survey, bulk water 10.5%, bulk electricity 8.9%, and projected CPI costs for other costs. What is important to highlight on this slide is that 29 billion is allocated to the equitable share to increase coverage of the provision of free basic services. Next slide. With regards to the local government conditional grant changes, the first change being the indirect component on the MIC. Over the 2022 MTF, DCOG will introduce an indirect component to the MIC. This is because despite measures implemented to support municipalities, we've seen poor performance remaining prevalent in this grant. Hence, the need to introduce an indirect component of the grant, allowing DCOG to directly appoint an implementing agent to fast-track implementation of infrastructure projects on behalf of municipalities that are struggling. The conversion will be done in year, and the criteria will be determined by DCOG, which includes indicators related to expenditure and reliability of infrastructure. Second bullet, application of non-financial performance in the in-year sub-stopping and reallocation process. This is to be tested in the MIC and focus on performance-related asset management. Full set of indicators, including those already identified for the MIC conversion, to be scored and ranked accordingly to determine which DORA enforcement measures is most appropriate. And lastly, the Municipal Systems Improvement Grant. A portion of the grant will be utilized to continue to support the institutionalization of the district development model. This was adopted by Cabinet in August 2019. The model is a method of government operating in unison that's focusing on municipal district and metropolitan spaces as the impact areas of joint planning, budgeting, and implementation. Continue on the changes to local government conditional grants. The renaming of the disaster grant. The name of the municipal disaster relief grant will be changed to municipal disaster response grant. The objective remains the same, and the change aligns with the existing NDMC processes in responding to the disasters that have occurred. And with regards to the BFI facility, adjustments have been made to align to the revised implementation plan and cash flow projection for the City of Cape Town, My City Public Transport Network. What is important to note with regards to this adjustment is that we're not reducing the City of Cape Town allocation, but rather we're just aligning the cash flow in line with what City of Cape Town has submitted to our colleagues at Budget Office. And lastly, 1 billion has been added through the BFI for infrastructure to RBIC to continue with the implementation of the potable water security and remedial works in George local municipality. Continuing with changes in terms of reprioritization, technical shifts, and additional allocation. 50 billion has been reprioritized from the INEP ESCOM grant to finance the operational requirements of the Independent Power Producer Office in the 2022-23 financial year. 8 billion in the 2022-23 and the following financial year respectively have been reprioritized from the Energy Efficiency and Demand Side Management Grant to finance the operational requirements. 10 billion is shifted from the spot component of the MIC to the IUDG in the 2022-23 to fund a spot project in Polokwane, that's in Limpopo. And over the MTF, 347 million is added to the Municipal Disaster Recovery Grant to fund infrastructure recovery in municipalities in the KZN. And lastly, 1.7 billion is added to the NDPG to fund the continuation of the city-led public employment program as part of the Presidential Employment Initiative. Amendments to the Local Government Financial Management Framework from the 2020-23. The FMG will make provision for the preparation of the asset registers. However, the MIC has a similar provision but broader as compared to the FMG, funding the development of asset management plan. National Treasury added this requirement in the responsibility of the administrators of the FMG. This is to ensure that there's no duplication of effort and funding for municipalities targeted for this support. Next slide. And lastly, members, the following slides just shows the equitable share and conditional grants allocation that are specific to the Western Cape. So this is the equitable share. 6 billion has been allocated for the current financial year, growing to 7.2 and 7.8 in the following year. And conditional grants allocations to the Western Cape. And last slide. This just shows the performance in terms of conditional grants in the Western Cape from the 2018-19 till the 2020-21 financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. There is our presentation. I think we can take questions on the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm going to take questions now. If you could please use the raise your hand function for me, and I'll take it in that order. Going once, Member Mackenzie. Okay, Member Mackenzie, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to check on slide number 4, which is my slide, page 4 as well. We've seen the local government increases, and thank you very much. It certainly will help our local governments. And then on page 7, under revenue collection, you increase. There's a trend of increasing during the COVID period as well. So the obvious question, why are we giving them more money? Is it because of the spending, or do they still under-collect what they need versus what they currently get? And then my second question also on page 4, it's the inflationary pressure. I mean, we see the petrol price, for example, so transfers to provinces, but the petrol prices obviously has gone up. How does that affect all the provinces? And did you get any pushback from provinces? So what you allocate versus inflation. And then on page number 8, you've mentioned the section, I think 16.5, if I can read my own handwriting. You indicated that the Eskom and the water boards, those fundings will obviously come back because of poor spending pressure. Have any money come back yet for from the water boards, and how much? And then on with obviously the PES is largely of the 2011 data. If you've got an indication from Census South Africa, because I see the people are still moving around also in my neighborhood, about when they will be done and when you can start using more recent data. And then on page 10 and also page 11, and I also made a note here, page 17, is there going to be public input on the PES, on the formula? Because I see that you did mention obviously the stakeholders, the provincial departments, the fiscal commission, but will the public be able to give input into the formula? Is there going to be a public participation input? And then on slide number 13, you mentioned on the data gaps. What was the data gaps that you're referring to? Because it wasn't too clear. And because you then mentioned also, if I heard correctly, you used the year before's data. And how does this impact on allocating funding? And then on page number 14, the ones of cash gratuity. I can't remember if you gave us an amount. If you can just give an indication on that. And similarly on page 13, who was responsible for that gap in data? Was it provinces or was it the National Department of Health? Similarly on page 17, on the incentive component, what was the delay for that and who was responsible? Was it provinces or the National Department of Transport? And then on page 27, I know you mentioned on the BRT transport funding. Is that for, so sorry for that, is that and then you indicated that it won't impact, it's just regarding the cash flow component. If you can just explain a bit more, because obviously the reduction is for 1 year, but then I see you allocated on the after years. What has changed? If you can just give us those details. And that's all my questions for now. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Member Nkondlo. Member Nkondlo, you need to unmute yourself. Member Nkondlo. Member Nkondlo, you need to unmute yourself. There we go.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Chair, I just wanted to understand, I think, on the substantive changes to the bill that have been already presented. I'm just checking the slide. I think you are predicting spending transfers from the contingency reserve. I would like a more simpler explanation, practically, you know, how such a clause would affect provincial or local municipality disasters. One appreciates this because I think it's one of those solutions in as far as cutting red tape in government, because indeed at times public will be listening to President or Minister of Finance making particular declarations in terms of budget, but the time, you know, the turnaround time of realizing those because of, you know, the bureaucratic process becomes a bit frustrating. So one appreciates, I think, that a profession. I also want to understand it in more understanding, especially as it relates to provinces and to municipalities. What would that mean? And I'm raising this because I think currently we're all dealing with some of the natural disasters, you know, but also those that would normally see in our province, like fires, and already now we're getting, one is thinking about floods and related, especially in poor communities. So how does this particular provision assist in the unlocking, you know, of the available financial resources for these spheres of government? So I just wanted to understand that in more simpler terms. And then in terms of the review that has been done, which I think is explained in I think slide 10, if I'm not mistaken. I think the risk adjusted index. My question here is that recently, I think based on these discussions and the operation to do as you see in the country about the influx of foreigners, especially documented and undocumented. One of the things that was I think shared in social media is actually the extent of the use of our public health services, particularly nationals, you know, into the system, and I think there was even a record of babies born here of a foreign origin, and I'm trying to understand how is that factored in here, because majority of those are known, because I think they are utilizing our public health system, and one is assuming based on the adjustment that has been made, that would be those that are necessarily I think, participating or records. And then I think, again, in the issue of the allocations, I think in particular on the PES, I see the continuation of the Presidential Employment Initiative, which once again must be welcomed, particularly as it is one intervention that assists us to deal with youth unemployment. And one sees the hiring of education and other assistance in schools for a period of 2 years. And the question I think we had in the last discussion on this matter, I think during the budget adjustments late last year, I would want to bring that question back here. The extent to which this particular funding, if these assistance gets to be put into the education and I think also in the health system, we have a similar. What then is the plan or the discussions with the specific departments during the time of exiting, this from a budget point of view? Because one looks at, the need and the demand in schools and the fact that in the first 2 years, these education assistants may be hired, and then come the end of this particular budget in the particular year. What then does the school do when there is such a need? Is there a conversation in terms of the absorption from the actual main appropriation of, for example, the Department of Education, the Department of Health, of such a resource? So for me, I'm just interested in understanding such a chair. And then I think my point here, okay, was in the, I think in the local government grants, I see the part of the grant that also is allocated. One would just ask, particularly on the City of Cape Town additional funding, I think utilizing the EPWP on the, I think it's a neighborhood watch, if I'm not mistaken, is the write-up on specifically what are the focus, what is the focus of this particular program as it is being funded and additional funds provided in this regard. That is the 1.7 billion grant. And for how long is this? Do you have information? And for how many public employment opportunities is this 1.7 billion going to be securing for the City of Cape Town? Do you have such information? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just ask mine now, because then once we're done, then we've at least have some of the majority of comprehensive questions covered then, I guess. Firstly, I just want to say to National Treasury, I do think that there are some good changes, more or less. The National Treasury seems to be starting to listen to the Western Cape, and it seems like the Western Cape and Gauteng are making the same arguments and making some changes to our budgetary allocation. However, I am still concerned that the changes do not cover previous budget cuts, inflation, or even cost of living figures. And in this regard, I do want to ask National Treasury that in future presentations, because you will see it in the bill, but you don't always see it in the presentations, but for future presentations, can we please include the previous 3 MTEF periods? And you need to then continue including the current MTEF period that you're putting before us. But at the end, you must also include the rate of change over the respective MTEF period. Because what happens is the budget keeps changing over the MTEF periods. And because it keeps changing, National Treasury essentially has the luxury of only putting up the new MTEF period, which does not show people what we are supposed to have received, what we received previously, and that what you are essentially budgeting for provinces to receive in the future. And in that regard, there is a concern from myself that then we end up playing with numbers in presentations. In terms of slides 1 to 8 to Ms. Xaba, who I think presented on those, I do take note of those increases in provinces. However, I must just point out those are all national figures across all provinces, which is also a bit misleading because the Western Cape figures on average is much, much different. So while I appreciate national government taking into consideration provinces more, which they should do, it is a bit misleading in this particular case because those slides don't specifically relate to the Western Cape. Then on slides, I can't remember the slide number, but it was the slide with the per capita allocation. And the per capita allocation for the Western Cape in terms of the PES was an average of 8.2. And similarly, Gauteng also had a low PES allocation. In the Eastern Cape, Free State, Limpopo, Northwest, Mpumalanga, Northern Cape were all more than those provinces. And the argument that was made there was to say that those provinces that National Treasury consider more rural are getting more money. But the problem is in the later slides, I think it was slide 13, I'm not sure if it was slide 13, but it was where it showed the different equitable share amounts that the different provinces are getting. And you will see that the Western Cape is getting the 5th largest equitable share, which is also the 5th lowest, I guess, so in the middle. And the difference there is on that slide, it showed that not only is Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal getting more than us, but Limpopo and the Eastern Cape are also getting more than us. So in the earlier slides, it was argued that the more poorer and more rural areas are supposed to be getting more of the equitable share. And by that logic, then technically KZN and Gauteng should they not be in the top 4. And if the argument is that KZN and Gauteng is big and, you know, they need money because, you know, they have more people and stuff, then Limpopo and the Eastern Cape shouldn't be in the top 4. So we have to think about our arguments because these arguments are contradictory because either we are then focusing on those who are poorer provinces and what National Treasury considers more rural, which is then essentially saying that, yes, you know, Gauteng, KZN, Western Cape, the better you do, the more we're going to punish you in terms of not giving you more money. Or the argument is that, okay, we are focusing on what National Treasury considers more rural provinces, which quite frankly, by National Treasury's own submission at our budget workshop, was a different definition for rural they had for provinces than they had for local government municipalities. So we need some clarity on how this is then allocated. I do agree with Ms. Xaba on the slide where she indicated that national government budget does not look good, but we have to also admit to ourselves that the reason the national government's budget is not looking good and decreasing over time because there's less to loot. And quite frankly, over time, we have to realize that provinces in total are not getting the percentage of the national budget that we should be getting in terms of the national constitution and truly what an equitable share should be. Then I would like to ask, in terms of Mr. Molokanele was presenting on the PES and the formula. He specifically showed us on the health review adjustments. I do know that those are kicking in, but I do think that not only do we need to request that National Treasury do specific presentations on the PES review to the health committees for us, as well as the education committees for us in the Western Cape. But we need to have a conversation as to what are the education factors going to be in the upcoming review, because we know that education is coming up in the review and the Western Cape does want a review on education. But now the question is, what are the factors that are going to be taken into account? And this then links up to what Member Mackenzie was asking about in terms of what are those data gaps. Is it in provinces? How do we fix it? Because you have now indicated that we are now going to use old data because of the data gaps. And also not only of that, there is concern regarding the operation of the census. It does not seem to be comprehensive and people are being missed in the counting. And if our people are not being counted, it will affect our provincial equitable share. Because currently in the majority of factors in the PES, the census of the previous 2011, I think, is being considered. So in this particular regard, if the census is not done properly now, it is going to affect future money for all provinces. Further, I would like to latch on something that member Nkondlo indicated, and this is regarding disaster relief. And to the National Treasury officials, you know, in the Western Cape, our community has been through a lot, and many other provinces have had very similar experiences. Our communities have been through drought, floods, fires, an economic recession, load shedding, and a global COVID-19 pandemic. And now in the Western Cape, what we are seeing, and I think in the Northern Cape and the Eastern Cape, and I think there's another province, we are now seeing essentially a locust plague. And this is a national mandate locust, money for locusts. In the Western Cape, we've had to use some of our own money to allocate money for locusts. This is, I think it was 5 million rand. But this is 5 million rand we could be spending on something else. But the same way we're spending other money on national mandates where we're not getting money, we are now spending money on locusts. And our communities have been through too much to also now not have money for locusts. And we can please have an indication as to, especially in the Karoo and the Garden Route areas where it's affected, where the National Treasury will be assisting our province for money for the locust plague. And then finally, I would like to find out, I think it's Ms. Muvangu was explaining the Eskom and the Water Board grants and the, or not the grants, Water Board grants, the grants for local municipalities. And you indicated previously that Eskom did give money back to National Treasury. Now, it's for me, what is so interesting is NERSA essentially increased what the percentages is for electricity prices, okay? Eskom today, as we are sitting here, is currently in a load shedding schedule, okay? Some of our members sometimes can't log on to meetings, or, you know, they have to essentially jump over hoops to even get to these meetings where we are discussing these things because of load shedding. And I just understand, why did Eskom give that money back to National Treasury? And quite frankly, why, instead of giving it back to National Treasury, can National Treasury not allocate that money to provinces like the Western Cape and Gauteng, to rather take that money and use it for procuring of IPPs for municipalities within their provinces? Because we need to actually now become energy independent and energy secure, because we cannot rely on Eskom going further like this. Thank you so much. I see a hand from member Brinkhuis. I'm just going to take his hand, and then I'm going to close this round of questions, and then I'm going to allow for answer from National Treasury before I open up again. Thank you so much. Member Brinkhuis.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to everybody again. Yes, Chair, to Treasury, thank you very much for the presentation, and we welcome the increases, especially on local government and also the provincial governments, also the increase in allocations. Thank you very much for that. My question is around playing an effective oversight, especially here in the Western Cape. Now that there is increase in allocation, how much oversight is Treasury going to play, especially here in the Western Cape, in terms of the inequality? The inequality is something that is hurting the Western Cape province very, very much. And it is only on the increase. So my question to National Treasury is simply that, how much oversight are you going to play, and how much in terms of regulation that money should be spent more equally throughout the province, so that we can see a steadily decrease or an end to inequality here in the Western Cape? Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much. National Treasury, Ms. Kmaba, are you going to allocate the questions among people?
All right. Thank you so much for such comprehensive questions. They leave us with a lot to think about. Yes, I think I will take questions that relate to slides 1 to 8. Of course, there are colleagues from IPP, because they deal a lot with allocation, can also work in there, come in there. And then Kolisang will take the questions relating to the provincial equitable share changes, and Preeti will take the ones relating to local government. But colleagues, feel free to also add in. Okay, so with regards to the first question, it was the question on if the local government is doing okay with the with the revenue allocations. Why are we giving them additional funding? So I think with regards to that question, the increase in local government is mostly because of Treasury trying also to support them with regards to service delivery. You will notice that in the national and the provincial, the reason why there was such a huge decline was mostly because of the fiscal consolidation that had taken place, which did not affect a lot, affect more the local government. So you see that we've had a lot of budget cuts, especially on compensation, and that which affected mostly the provincial and the national sphere. So that is another reason why you're seeing a growth which is more on local, but less on the provincial side. But it's not necessarily that there's like much more money being added into there. It's reflecting the changes there in the growth. But there's also some increases that have been given in conditional grants also to support the service delivery, which were not the case in the national and the provincial sphere. And then I think the other ones were also comments with regards to the slides that I was presenting. And then we went to the Honorable Batman. I think you asked about the per capita share. You're giving us a very good conversation to push forward in terms of what is it that we want to reflect. Do we want to reflect rural areas getting more funding or not? But I think what's important is that in the equitable share, we know that it reflects a different things. It also reflects population, where also the numbers will reflect how big the province is. It will also reflect economic activity and all those other elements. But I think the slides is important for us to put in there because we have had comments previously about rural provinces not being supported financially. So I think the slides is there not to say that that is the direction of the equitable share or the national treasury precisely, but it's also to show that the equitable share does have a redistributive element to it, where you find that the rural areas also per capita are funded much more than the more urban areas. But that does not necessarily mean that that is the only direction and that is the only element that we look at. But I think my colleagues who deal more with the equitable share can also talk to that. Yes, on the issue about the slide talking about the national. So yes, my slides do talk about the national. We're giving you an overview, but when you go further into the slides, the local government and the provincial government, then they give you the more details with regards to how the changes to how the budget has been allocated for the Western Cape. I do take into consideration, and we will note your request to have the changes in baselines in the presentation as well. We do normally present changes to baselines when we have discussions with the treasuries and the other stakeholders, maybe in Parliament and so on. But if it's something that you are very interested in, we would really consider that, because it's true. Yes, it does show the changes to baselines does show how the current MTF differs from what was allocated in the previous allocation. So it does give you a full picture of how your budget has actually changed. So we will do that. Again, on my slides, I think those were the questions that were relating to my slides. But I just wanted to talk to one question that was relating to whether we're having conversations about the employment initiative. So I have been part of meetings that are monitoring the equitable, the allocation and expenditure relating to the presidential employment in education. And at this point, I would like to say that we have not had meetings or conversations where we want to convert this to a permanent, and to a contrary, what the framework and the grant itself, it allows the education to employ this youth on a more temporary, so that they get working opportunity and they can use that to apply for jobs in the future. But I think that it is an important discussion to have, and it is something that we'll probably have to take forward. But it would also have to be looked in the broader fiscal framework, because as you have already seen there, we are seeing a very slow increase in the budget, and it becomes difficult to, to accommodate a lot of priorities that we have. But I do agree with the member that, I mean, it is one of the best performing programs that we are funding at this point. So it does make sense that we look at how it could actually be made a permanent feature, so that it continues to provide important work opportunities for the youth. Can I please give my colleagues an opportunity to respond to other questions? Litsipa, then Kolisang, and then lastly, Preeti. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Amo, and thanks to the honorable members for the questions. Let me specifically start with the question from Honorable Nkondlo in terms of how the new provision is assisting with responding to the issues of disasters. I think there was an appreciation from Honorable Nkondlo that given the nature of the disasters, they don't necessarily align it to the budget processes that we have. Although there is also a provision that is currently in place in terms of, I think it's the PFMA section 30 2D of it, which really speaks to the appropriation of funds for unforeseen and unavoidable expenditures. So what the new clause really does, it really now starts to allow the Minister of Finance to then approve expenditure. If that expenditure in particular cannot be reasonably delayed without negatively affecting a service delivery, which is where then the disasters would fall into that category. I must state that because also honorable members of some of the provision of the PFMA, especially as it guards against expenditure before the act has been implemented. So it says you cannot spend more than 45% of the allocation per province in terms of, or maybe per allocation, the grant to a municipality before the president has enacted the bill. So there's still that a provision then, which then limits how the minister can then use the new clause. But by and large, it does mean that the funds for disasters can start, being dispersed as soon as possible. I mean, in the case of the what is happening in KwaZulu-Natal, we are already exploring some of these and how to use this this particular clause in the bill to fast track government's response in as far as that is concerned. But I must add that there are already other provisions, honourable members, which we have to explore before we get there. For instance, there is an appreciation that when it comes to time for disasters, we all have to pull together. So all the other grants, not just the disaster-related grants, actually can be used in a case of a response to a disaster, where, for instance, the affected province or municipality would then have to alert the NDMC of that need to reprioritize some of its grants, and then NDMC together with the Treasury and the transferring officer of that particular grant, then they can approve such a reprioritization to augment that. So that's, I think that's our submission, honourable members, to say, this really allows us, to act fast, especially because the disaster money is already part of the contingency reserves. There are also some other additional sources that can be tapped into in the speed of light. But I must just state that we're not at that position yet. There's still a lot of money that was not spent in terms of the current financial year, which would be the current act, which we are now assisting the provinces to spend before we can get to the disasters. But if there was a need, we would then invoke that particular section. I'm just then I want to add to what you said, Amo, in terms of that question around the revenue, the increase in revenues from local government, and how we then added additional funds there. And you're very correct in terms of our approach in that, it's about service delivery, and the fiscal framework really is designed in such a way that we step in where the municipalities are unable to. So in terms of providing services to the indigents, that is a national government's responsibility from constitutional provision, which says that municipalities and provinces are entitled to an equitable share. That is where and why we have stepped in, because the impact of the pandemic has actually seen a lot of indigent people. In terms of the numbers, they've actually gone up, and as a result, we had to then close that gap. With the expectation, of course, that the municipalities will then continue to use their own revenues to also subsidize where government cannot reach, but also to build and maintain the infrastructure that is at the moment in a dire state. So that's just really where government has come in, and I think Honourable Chairperson has spoken to the issue of NERSA increasing in terms of the bulk electricity there. And those are some of the things that from the fiscus we have to continuously respond to, irregardless of how the municipal revenues are performing. But we do need to step in and subsidize the poor amongst us in terms of assisting the municipalities to be able to close that loop. So if you look at really what is happening there, there's a 10% in terms of bulk water. So that is also quite high. And without the additional resources that we presented, we would have put municipalities that have a high number of indigent households in a predicament. I just want to extend, maybe the chairperson also made a comment around the data that comes from our grant system. I nobody will speak to the provincial one, but I just want to add that also we're looking forward to the census data because we also need to update the local government equitable share, especially the revenue adjustment factor there, which requires income data, which unfortunately is only collected at the moment through the census. So we're still using the 2011 there. However, we've been having these regular engagements with States SA from last year, where we're exploring going forward, what are some of the data needs that we need considered, to update our formulas on a more regular basis. There was also a comment. I know Pretty is gonna add to these. It's gonna respond to the issue of the reduction in terms of the My City. I just want to add that maybe here there was an agreement between ourselves as the Treasury and the City of Cape Town in terms of their cash flow projections, in terms of the amount of money they need and the amount of money that need to be made available. But upon assessing, their let me call it the capacity to then roll out. So when the money was then being made available, they then still came back to us to say, listen, we have relooked at, our capacity to take up some of these projects for the My City. And we do think that, we may need to, to have some of the funds rescheduled. By that we mean we reduce the allocations in the earlier years, and then we'll take it back to them at a later stage when they've built the necessary capacity to then be able to undertake such a huge project. And that was then endorsed by the Treasury to say that they can go ahead and do that. And through these two budgets, which was the in-year and this one, we've completely dealt with this. With that matter now. So the funds that will be flowing to the city are then that we have then revised and agreed that these will be the funds that the city is able to spend in each financial year. And I must say that this is one of the ways in which we want our municipalities and provinces to conduct their business. So rather than keeping the money in their baselines when they know fully well that they are unable to spend it, that they come to us and say, we're unable to spend this money for these particular reasons, and then can you give us this money at a later date, which is an arrangement that we actually have with the city. So there won't be any impact in terms of the project itself. It may be ramped up, in the later years of its project span, which is, I think it was about 10 years. But we continue to monitor this because the honorable members would also be appreciation of some of the challenges that are being faced by, municipalities and provinces in as far as there are unforeseen circumstances that make the plans, not to be workable. And in that instant, we then need to chip in and be in a position to assist. Now, also on the issue about the presidential employment allocations as it relates to the neighborhood development grant, there is a write-up that is available in terms of the business case, which helped the Treasury as well as the presidency to make an informed decision around making these allocations to the city. So there is a business case. However, through the this division of revenue, we've then requested a specific information from cities that was not available at the time in terms of how many people will benefit from these employment programs. It's not just the EPWP in the jobs that are being targeted, but it's all employment, public employment related jobs that can be done. So in terms of the costs, they vary from one municipality to the other, or from one project to the other. So we're expecting that information from the city. And also just to clarify, of the 1.7 billion that is allocated through that grant for these purposes, 20% of it is going to the city of Cape Town, while the other 80% goes to the other 7 metros. I wanted to also make a point really around, I think I take the point around the ESCOM issue and the NESA and really how that is impacting the economy and of course, I mean, various provinces and municipalities are affected quite differently by this. But just to say that, you know, the 50 million that is being channeled to the DMRE department, you know, for the IPP office is ready to also assist in municipalities. So the project that we are currently involved in now is to look at the business model, the electricity business model for the various municipalities. Because, of course, of the changes in the electricity landscape, there are challenges that we are foreseeing there, especially because we now need to be really cognizant of the impact of climate change. So there's an appreciation that, you know, we need to change the way we are doing things. So part of those is for that national IPP office to then, you know, assist in terms of the procurement of the IPPs for municipalities. So even though the money is from ESCOM was meant for municipalities through that grant, but it is also to benefit the municipalities in terms of if we can set up an IPP procurement plan that would benefit the municipalities. It really doesn't matter where it sits. I think, in fact, one of the key findings from the diagnostic that was done is that the municipalities would actually prefer that this sits, you know, with the national IPP office, where they can just piggyback on it and participate in terms of the tender process that is being run there. So we are hopeful that, you know, this will assist in that avenue again. And maybe to just add that this is a particular grant for infrastructure, so it doesn't really link up with the operational issues that ESCOM is facing. So ESCOM, I mean, it's within government's right to then recall this grant if ESCOM is failing on its operational matter. So it's not linked really to the load shedding that we're experiencing, because that is an operational issue that ESCOM has. But this is specifically for the municipalities' benefit in terms of the ESCOM provision in those areas where municipalities cannot provide this service themselves. I will be happy, honorable members, if my colleagues would then call me back in for some of the issues that I may have missed and not addressed, which I should have addressed. But I think from my side, I would like to end at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'll address the, as Amakelani has suggested, that I address the PES issues. So the first one first question from Honorable Mackenzie with regards to if status has indicated to us when the census will be done. No, they haven't indicated to us as yet when the census will be done, but I do not foresee it impacting the 2023 equitable share, just given the time it'll take to finish the count, to verify the data and publish the census results. So I think it will be something that we'd look forward to for the 2024 equitable share. And it is correct that what Motsepe has mentioned, that we do look forward to the census because obviously it has an impact on the population data that we use. And just for members to know, the chairperson highlighted where Western Cape sits in terms of the equitable share and where other provinces sit. Prior to 2011, Eastern Cape was actually the biggest receiver of the equitable share. And once the census came out, it really changed the game just because of population dynamics changing between provinces, where now KZN and Gauteng were the biggest winners when it came to population sizes and what they do get from the equitable share. So it will be interesting to find out what this year's or the 2022 census will bring and how it will change the dynamics in terms of the allocations we give to provinces. With regards to getting public inputs on the equitable share formula, we haven't gone out for direct inputs from the public. However, given that we work with the 9 provincial treasuries, if within committee meetings or public hearings, they do get some inputs from the public, they're more than willing to give them to us with regards to things that we should look out for the equitable share and things of that nature. But we haven't, as Treasury, and as far as I can remember, we haven't really gone out directly for public inputs with regards to the equitable share. The data gaps that I mentioned in the presentation with regards to the health component really relate to the demand component of the health component, where facilities, be it clinics or hospitals, didn't report for the year 2020 and 2021. Some facilities in certain provinces weren't reporting on the utilization data. And this is very important because we need to know how many people use clinics, use hospitals, but some facilities, probably due to COVID-19, just didn't report. And it's the responsibility, firstly, at the facility level to make provision for this data and report it and send it up to the Provincial Department of Health, where the Provincial Department of Health will then give it to the National Department of Health. So when Honorable Mackenzie asked who was responsible, it's primarily the facility's job to provide that type of data. To address Honorable Nkondlo's question about how the equitable share does it take into consideration the influx of foreign nationals, whether it be documented or undocumented. We do that through the demand component. If you look at slide 10, we have a patient load data component, which utilizes clinic utilization data as well as hospital utilization data. And this is where we foresee these types of movements of the demand for health services with people crossing the border, coming and using health services in South Africa. That's where such things will be captured. With regards to the chairperson's request to have the PES review presented to education and health committees, we will take that back to the team. I'm sure, just like we had the budget workshop earlier this year, I'm sure that this is something that they will be open to having to discuss the provincial equitable share review and the impact on the 2 components. So we will take that back to the team and they will indicate the availability, or if you would like to suggest it to a high level, then I'm sure they will respond to it. I think the chairperson mentioned the review of the education component and when that will be done. If I'm not mistaken, I may be paraphrasing your question, and apologies if I am. The education review, the education component has already been reviewed. It was actually the first component that we reviewed, and some of the changes that we did there is really including data, new data from the Luritz tracking system, which is a learner unit tracking system, and including being a part of the component, as well as utilizing mid-year population estimates to capture the population of people that are between 5 to 17 years old. If just to give you some background, before we used to use the census 2011, and as everybody would agree that that is old data. So the mid-year population estimates have now disaggregated the ages. So we are now able to capture the population that sits between 5 to 17. So those were the two changes we made to the education component of the provincial equitable share. I don't know if I've captured all the questions, but I think those are the only questions relating to the equitable share. Thank you.
Ms. Kaba, I'm not sure if there's anything else that someone wants to add.
Oh, sorry, Honorable Batman, I think, Litipa, if you can just talk to the plague, the locust plague. The Honorable asked about the disaster and whether it's something that we need to consider. I think just before you come in there, my understanding with that is that when it has to do with national disasters, those are considered by the National Disaster Center. So I don't know the background to it, but I will try to investigate with my colleagues on the Treasury side that are working with the Western Cape, whether there's been any form of additional funding requested for the relief of that plague. But I will also ask my colleague Litipa to maybe comment on that. I think that is the I think that is the only comment I see here on my side that has not been answered to, but you can let us know if we've missed anything. Thank you.
Thanks. I think you're correct. That is a matter that is by application. So I'm not aware it hasn't been brought to our attention. However, the process is such that when there is a disaster of that nature, then to be able to what's the right word? But for the funds to be made available, there would need to be a classification of such as a disaster, whether it's a provincial disaster or national disaster, whatever the case might be. So in this case, we would need to first ensure that the province has classified this as a disaster. The honorable members would also appreciate that in the past, this needed to be declared. So there's no more need for declaration. It's about the classification now, and then that would then unlock the funds. And the process to unlock the funds really is to then provide an assessment to the NDMC to say this is how much is needed for this, and it's been classified, and then they would approach us, and then would then together with them determine the funding that should address that matter. If the honorable members though have more information on this, I'm happy to then take that information and make a follow-up. But it's not something that has been brought to our attention now. Thanks.
Thank you so much. On the last point, I think it is something that we consider to find out, because perhaps it lies with the National Department, and perhaps that has not been received by National Treasury. But I think from the Western Cape side, as a committee, we need to ask them as well whether there's any communication on that front. But I see there are some Provincial Treasury people in the meeting as well, so perhaps they would also be able to assist us. Ms. Kaba, I see your hand is up. Is there something that I missed out?
My apologies, Honorable Partner. Yes, there's one last question. It was relating to oversight on the inequality. So the member was asking how much oversight do we provide on the money that is sent to the local and the provincial, so that it is spent equally across across districts and all municipalities. That is the one question. So I will give a perspective from the provincial side, and then maybe Letipa and Preeti can give on the local side. So it is something that we have recently started doing ever since there was this introduction of the district model. So in our analysis, as well as our our early warning systems, we are now also looking at, even when we are doing our benchmark meetings. So benchmark meetings is meetings that we have annually with provinces, where we are looking at how allocative efficiencies and how the budget really has been allocated for the province. So one of the analysis that we do is also looking at the budget for each sector and how it's distributed across different districts or municipalities. So I think that is the level that we are at this point. We do make provinces aware of their allocation and how it's distributed across different districts and municipalities. But over and above that, at this point, we don't have that, because, as you know, the province and municipality have their autonomy. So even if we can give advice in terms of how funds can be allocated, it is ultimately a decision that is made in the province. So I think if there is concern about maybe the distribution when it goes to the local government, it also needs to be taken up and discussed thoroughly in the province, so that it's addressed. But we do make those recommendations when we look at the budget and spending, and highlight areas where we feel probably they are not given enough attention. Ditipa and Preeti, maybe you can also look at that, because you also have benchmark meetings with municipalities, and also look at how they are allocating and spending their budget in municipalities. Thanks.
Thanks, Amo, with the permission, Chair. Yeah, I think this is I think there's one big maybe area that I need to address before I get to that. Honorable members and Chair, along with this division of revenue, the government has taken a decision. This was through the Budget Council, where the MSCs of Finance sit with the Minister of Finance to then review all the conditional grants that are there in the system, and amongst the issues that have led to that are issues around I think the issue of the misalignment really between the relevant provincial conditional grants and the local conditional grants, but of importance to the point where we are deliberating on now is the issue of departmental oversight, whether there is a sufficient support that are being provided to the subnational sphere, especially to carry through the government's policy in terms of issues around equity and so forth. So we will also be looking at the allocation criteria and the linkages there in terms of whether there are some general purpose grants and then some specific conditional grants, whether it's project-based or formula-driven, in terms of the incentives, in terms of the allocation. So we are looking at the package of how then do we ensure that we still are true to the policies around addressing equity across the fiscal levers that we then have. So that review started in March. We envisage that the first part of it will be completed in August, but the bigger portions of it will be completed in August 2023. So we will also, just for the members to know that there's work that continues to review if we are doing enough in as far as that is concerned. But from where I sit in terms of the allocation, when we look at the allocation criteria, so one of the elements or one of the provisions that we have is that if there is no equity in terms of the allocations that are being made, we have a right as the Treasury to then, in a way, overall the sector department that would have made the allocation and then use the equity principles that we have to then address that. So that's what we've been doing, and we do continue to do that with the additional allocations that are being made available. And unfortunately, I don't consistently sit in those benchmark engagements. But for the ones that I've sat in, there are really some tough questions that the municipalities, which is the 17 non-delegated municipalities, have to answer in terms of how they have utilized their budgets to address the inequalities amongst their jurisdictions. But maybe if Priti, I know Priti has issues with connection at the moment, but if she knows more about that, she can add. But that is as far as I can submit to you, Honorable Chair and members. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Maba. Is there any others that need to add on before I open up?
No, I think we covered everything, unless we've missed anything from your side. But yeah, thank you so much.
No problem, colleagues. Because we have an hour and 15 minutes left of the meeting, I'm going to ask that we start with follow-up questions first, and then depending on time, we will see whether we have time for new questions. I do see Member Bosman's hand, and I do note he has not asked a question yet. Let me just quickly see how many other hands there are as well. Okay, Member Bosman, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mine is actually not a new question. It's a follow-up to a question that was answered earlier with regards to the review of the Provincial Equitable Share for Education, and specifically around the validity of the data used in terms of the Learner Unit Record Information and Tracking System, or LURITS. To what extent was that data compared with the provincial Cape Central Education Information Management System, what we call CMIS in the Western Cape? Because as far as I remember, Chairperson, up until January this year, when I was still in the Education Committee, CMIS in the Western Cape and LURITS were not synchronized, and they were not working in terms of what we call SAMSA in the education sector. So how are we able to track learners moving from other provinces into different provinces, and sort of look at that information if these data systems are not properly linked? So I suspect the follow-up question that I'm asking is, to what extent was reliance made on CMIS data in terms of Western Cape Education Department data, and how did they compare that to what is on LURITS and what is available through SAMSA, just in terms of tracking learners to be able to inform that review of the education part of the equitable share? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Since I had a follow-up on that as well, I just want to add that I do understand that there was changes in the education formula previously, but this was not technically a review. It was an adjustment because the numbers changed. But factors such as special needs education, for example, is not and has not been taken into consideration in the PACE formula. And this is something the Western Cape has been asking for a long time. So there is a difference between our numbers changing because we're updating with numbers and changing the factors that we take into account when deciding the formula. Member Mackenzie?
Chair, Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Molekanele, for that answer on the health question of mine. Do they have a list of the facilities that did not correctly record their data or did not provide their data, and which provinces that they are? If they can provide us with a list, please, because that is obviously quite crucial, because it assists them to make the informed decisions to allocate hundreds of millions of rands. So that is quite important to me, just to get an understanding of those lists, because I'm an alternate in the health committee, we'll need to ask those facilities what can be done to strengthen them so they don't. Yes, we know it was COVID, but going forward, we don't want COVID to be an answer to everyone's who can't do something. It was COVID. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Member McKenzie. Yes, we cannot have the answer being COVID for the next 5 years. Also, just on that education front, I do want to ask whether special needs education will now be taken into account in the review, but also something the Western Cape has been asking for many years is where the gender-based violence and community safety factors will be taken into account in the PES formula going forward. And I think that is quite important. And I do remember what Member Bosman was referring to is in the budget workshop, when the National Department of Education was presenting at the budget workshop. It was actually in the presentation, and it was indicated the differences. So as a budget committee, we have asked that the different departments and Stats SA please have a conversation with each other, because Stats SA and national and provinces data were all different. The Western Cape's data was the same as Stats SA's data, but National's data was completely different to Stats SA and completely different to the Western Cape. And that is where that discrepancy comes in, is the data reliable? To my knowledge, we are still waiting for the answer on that particular front. My one follow-up question is actually on the IPPs. I do understand that the 50 million is being channeled to the IPP office. The grant is not for infrastructures regarding operations. And I have two follow-up questions in this regard. The first is, firstly, the RAPE office, REIPP office, RAPE, in the Ministry of Mineral Resources and Energy, is actually to get IPPs so that we can provide energy to Eskom. And then the rest of us buy energy from Eskom, irrespective from, municipality or whatever, but you get your energy from Eskom. The IPPs I'm talking about is when a municipality goes and procures for its own IPPs. So the municipality is independent of Eskom. Because even if Eskom puts up those IPPs, and you'll see it in different places in our province, like Laingsburg and Beaufort, there's lots of IPPs that Eskom has. But irrespective of those IPPs, when it's load shedding, Eskom still decides the lights must go off. But when you're procuring directly from a supplier, the municipality will also have control over whether those lights goes off and when those lights go off. So there is a bit of a difference. In terms of the grant being for infrastructure, not for operations, that is actually more concerning, because if the grant is for infrastructure and the money is being given back, then off the top of my head, I can think of the fact that I know that Ankerlig, for example, power station in the Western Cape, wants money so that it can build its pipes to the border of its station, so that if Transnet can also then put in its piping so that it can get to the Saldanha Bay Harbour, so that we can import liquefied natural gas into South Africa for Saldanha Bay IDZ as a hub, and the rest, for example, like Gorikwa as a spoke. For example, at the Gorikwa station, if that one in Mossel Bay was considered, the one pipeline would be approximately 20 kilometers, I think, and the other one would be about approximately 24 kilometers, which to us might seem a lot in terms of monetary value, but in terms of the liquefied natural gas industry, it's not that much, quite frankly. So if Eskom is giving money back for infrastructure, when in fact our current power stations need to be upgraded so that we can accommodate the future of liquefied natural gas, then that is concerning. Because quite frankly, they maybe just give the money to the provinces so that we can then work with Eskom to upgrade that infrastructure and assist where we can to ensure that that pipeline is then installed. If we can just get some information on the infrastructure money in that regard, then thank you. I see a note here on the chat box from Member McKenzie asking if we could also please get a list of the water boards that gave money back. I support that. We need to know what we don't know so that we can assist you. National Treasury is not our enemy. Our enemy in this country is corruption, it's maladministration, and it's fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Ms. Klaba, those are the only hands I saw. You're welcome to allocate the questions accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. So I see the questions are related to the PES, the review. So Kolisang, please take that on the educational review component, and then the IPP detail. I don't know if it's clear. Pretty is back. But I think it's mostly also your comment on what you are suggesting we should be considering. And I think it's something that we also need to take forward. I'm not sure if Pretty wants to add on that, but she can if she wants to add on that. And then the list of the water boards and the facilities that we will provide in writing, of course. Yeah, so please, Kolisang, if you can take those additional comments on the equitable share and the IPP, Lucifer, and then Pretty. Thank you.
Thanks, Amu. I'll try and answer the questions. They were very difficult questions, especially the validity of LURDS as compared to CMIS data. Unfortunately, as at Treasury, we don't have view of the education system, the Western Cape system of tracking learners. So we would have to really trust that whatever issue there is between the National Department of Basic Education as well as the Western Cape Department of Education, that the two departments at national and provincial would sort out whatever issue they have between discrepancies of data before the National Department of Basic Education actually signs over or gives us the data that we use in the equitable share. But it's something that I'll follow up on with colleagues as well as colleagues at the National Department of Basic Education on how that matter between CMIS and LURDS, that those discrepancies were taken care of. With regards to also asking for facilities that did not provide utilization data, we'll follow up with the Department of Health on giving us those the list of facilities that did not provide the data that is required. With regards to the review of the education component, we'll take that the additional special needs and things of that nature that the Western Cape has suggested. We'll take it back to the colleagues. I do know that from the last time when I was working with the Provincial Equitable Share a couple of years ago, there was that situation, but I'll follow up with my colleagues on where that situation is of including special needs learners into the equitable share. Then we'll give you formal feedback with that regard. I hope I've answered the questions, if there are no follow-ups.
Thank you so much. I do think those were all the follow-up questions. Colleagues, because it is 11 o'clock, I want to first ask whether there are any members of the public who are with us. Apologies, Mr. Pakis, did I miss a question that you need to answer?
Honorable Chair, it's the issues around the ESCOM.
Oh, yes.
And
yes.
yeah, I think I take note of the point you're making, but I think the challenge that we're facing, especially with the recommendation that money be given to provinces to do this, would be on the issues around the powers and functions, because we would be constrained by that. But I think the point that we're making is there are some inefficiencies, unfortunately, in as far as these grants are being spent, and to that effect, there does need to be some solutions that are being made, and I think the review that we are doing of all the conditional grants will also look at ESCOM, the ESCOM grant. It's always for us. It's always a difficult sell to justify why we would move infrastructure money for operational purposes when we know that the infrastructure itself is lacking. But we're always constrained by, for instance, where you would have identified the power issues. Maybe that's outside of the jurisdiction of the ESCOM, that is the municipal grant that should be addressing that, and that is not being fully utilized for those purposes. But I think I take the point that the committee is making as far as that is concerned. We're just asking that the review process be given some time so that it can help us pave a way forward in as far as what then happens when the sphere that is charged with the responsibility fails. The other issue in terms of the IPPs, I take the point you're making, Honorable Chair, there. So the MRE IPP, is just one of the solutions. In fact, it is what the metros have said they would prefer, because it's less onerous than having to set up their own. And by the way, in terms of setting their own, I know a unit in the Treasury is trying to advise, come up with some circular to assist them unlock some of the issues that are related to the legislation around how they would go about setting this up, because it's not something that the municipalities have really been doing at scale. So there are those discussions that are also taking place. The issue about the water boards, Honorable Chair, I'm not sure whether I missed it or maybe I just failed to explain that properly. If it relates to the part of the presentation that I made, we are introducing a section that helps us, to be able to have a closer look at ESCOM as well as the water boards. It is not that they have brought money back, but we are saying with these provisions, if they don't spend the money, then we are going to be able to take it back from them. So it's not like they have been giving back the money. The issue is it's money that has not been retained, even though in other instances they wouldn't have spent it, and we didn't have a legal basis for us to say you can bring back the money or we can reallocate the money either to another water board or back to the fiscus. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Pakis, quickly before you go away, I've comments regarding the electricity and water stuff on the chat box. Let me just read these out quickly. Member Nkontla has asked if we could please get clarity of the relationship between the electricity infrastructure grant and funding allocated through DMRE, that's for securing additional energy to the grid through IPPs, which municipalities are still also having access to, given their status declared by Minister to afford them as power generators. And I think Member Mackenzie's one relates to the water board as to, is it not done yet? So that comment came as you were talking about the conditions for the funding. So I'm assuming that that's probably Member Mackenzie. Am I correct in this interpretation?
Thank you. You answered it. Thank you, Chair. So it's not done yet. They're still going to do it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Those are the follow-ups I'm getting here on the chat box, and then I'm going to close this particular session. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Honorable Chair. Thanks to the honorable members. So there are two grants really for electricity infrastructure. One is directly transferred to the municipalities that are licensed for electricity provision. Then for those that are not licensed for electricity provision, then it is the funds that are given to ESCOM. So in those areas, ESCOM would be licensed. So ESCOM is licensed to then build the necessary infrastructure to bring people people into the grid, which is the main grid. But what we are really, in terms of the IPP, the additional grid that is coming through the IPP, is really to try and address issues of additional capacity that is needed, but also of a different nature, because the focus there is really on climate resistant mitigation measures now. So we were moving away from coal. So that is solemnly funded from the DMRE's operational budget. So it's not infrastructure in nature, but it's just to facilitate and bring more the private sector expertise and resources into the mix, while the infrastructure part is really just to build those that infrastructure to bring more people to the grid and maintain the current infrastructure assets that the ESCOM and municipalities have for electricity.
And just I'm sorry if I missed it now, the water board, so the conditions are only on now, on
Yes.
the funding.
Yes,
So it wasn't previously on the funding.
No. There was no previous. So in other words, there were no conditions that existed before. So this bill, if passed, will then help us, to start putting those measures in place.
Thank you. I do know, for example, in nuclear, that there are conditions, for example, on maintenance and when maintenance is done. That if you don't do, for example, maintenance on the 1st of May for nuclear, then perhaps we are able to also legislate maintenance and repairs for ESCOM, so that irrespective of come what may, that infrastructure is looked after. Because what is happening essentially is we delay and delay and delay the maintenance and repairs, and then eventually, when the maintenance and repairs need to be done, then it cannot be done because those stations need to keep on running because other stations have failed. And essentially, you keep on driving the car while the car needs to be in the repair shop. And it's not going to work because eventually you're not going to have a car. Cool.
Yes.
Colleagues, I just want to find out if there are any members of the public present who would like to ask a question. I have not received anything via email. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, have you received anything in writing?
No, Chairperson, I've received nothing.
Okay. Is there any members of the public in the meeting? Okay. Colleagues, I am going to ask that we take a 22-minute break and return at 11:30. And I ask that you take this time, the different political parties, their representatives, to apply their minds. And then at 11:30, we will then put forward our views based on what we've heard and how we feel about this particular bill. For the National Treasury officials, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for always assisting us with all of the different questions and requests that we have. We will definitely be sending you some resolutions for information. And like I've said previously, National Treasury is not our enemy. Our enemy is the corruption, the fruitless and wasteful expenditure in our country. And we need to make sure that every single penny we receive is spent well. Because it's not National Treasury's money or Provincial Treasury's money, it's the people's money. It's their taxes that we are spending back on them for service delivery. Thank you so much. The officials are thus excused. Colleagues, I'm just going to put my video off while we take a short break. At 11:30, we'll be putting forward our respective views as a committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
It's 11:30. 11:30, we are starting up again. Colleagues, if I could just get hands now, what we'll do is we're going to go through respective views. If you have requests for resolutions, also please put those now, requests for the resolutions and information, please put those now when you put your views. Once the views have been put, I will then ask for whether we need to vote on the matter. Members, if I could get hands raised now. Member Mackenzie.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I've just also submitted my views in writing, but I'll read it for the record just to the committee. You know,
Just
one
hang on
always...
quickly, Member Mackenzie. Did you email it to Ms. Kamish Ahmed?
I just sent her my views. I've broken it down into reasons, and I've also, if you could just let me just send it to you. I think I've sent it to you as well.
Okay. Ms. Kamish Ahmed, do you have it in your inbox?
I received it. Thank you, Chair.
Can we put it up? Because then we can read and listen to Member Mackenzie at the same time.
Well, I can talk through the last, because I'm not going to go through every column by column, Chairperson, because
No problem.
all of you have received the budget document before. So I'll just start on my last page, on
Can you
page
just
14.
ask Ms. Kamish Ahmed quickly to make it a little bit bigger?
Page 14 of my submission.
Cool. Let's go to that page then. And then I'll go through the document afterwards.
But let me first thank the National Treasury for always giving us clear answers. And I'm actually, as we did, one of our resolutions is to ask for reasons why the old health figures were raised, because it have massive implications. If data submitted is old, being used. So one of the resolutions that I did submit earlier on was to submit the latest data. The big point is always, we were using 2011 census data in 2022, and we understand that the census are coming to fruition, and I've seen census in my area where I live, I've seen it in the constituency, but we have to use the most recent data because it does help us. We appreciate the additional fundings, but we know that the cost of living has gone up. All of us now are paying, I think, 21 rand a litre for petrol, and likely to go up again. So you can imagine that the cost of living consistently goes up, and it's massive implications for all budgets. And so, and it provides a huge challenge for all services. And I think one of the members talked about a disaster management, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things come at a cost, whether it's law enforcement, whether provincial funding for leave officers, all these things come at a cost. So one, excluding the additional learners at education, such with the additional people at hospitals. You're seeing Khayelitsha Hospital, the increase of number. Somebody was asking about documented or undocumented individuals. As somebody who served on the Mitchells Plain Hospital Board, I can tell you the amount of people the hospital continue to increase every single day, not even every single week, every single day. And the hospital staff are, like Khayelitsha Hospital, consistently do their best. But if the budget doesn't follow the people 100%, it has a massive implication for all of us. So for this reason, on some that I've put in writing, I really cannot support the proposal for the division of revenue bill, but that does not at a 1 minute suggest we welcome any additional funding. We do appreciate the support from municipalities. They are struggling, as we all know, people, not even with COVID, before COVID. So it doesn't negate the welcoming of some of those numbers, but based on the current budget and the current numbers, column by column, as you can go through them, I cannot in good conscience support the division of revenue bill. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before I take the next hand, let's just quickly go up to page 1 of your document, just so that members can see what has been submitted. And Ms. Kamish Ahmed, if you could just make it a little bit bigger for us, please. Just take, just move it completely up to the top.
Where do you want it to the top, the page 1 or top
Yes,
of page
please.
14? Okay.
No, top of page 1.
Sure.
Okay, now let's make it a bit bigger.
Okay. How's that?
Okay. So Member Mackenzie has submitted to us on behalf of the Democratic Alliance submission regarding a proposal for the negotiating mandate. Let's see there. Okay, so those are statistics in the first part. Let's go down. Let's move down. Okay, those are all statistics. Provincial grant allocations. Okay. Let's go down. Okay, Mackenzie, I assume this is from the bill. Okay, let's go down.
Thank you. Yes, Chairperson, all the documents, all the figures are straight from the actual bill.
No problem. Let's go down. Okay, let's go down. It's all still figures. Okay, wait, let's stop there. Okay, those are still figures, and that's where Mackenzie started reading and speaking to the information. Let's go down. Okay, let's go down, and then that's just a bibliography. Let's go down. Okay, there's nothing after that. Okay, members, I will take other views now. Member Mackenzie, I'm just going to lower your hands along. Going once, going twice. I think something that we need to perhaps just reiterate was a point Member Bosman has indicated regarding the discrepancy between LURITS and the SEMA system within the education. And we do need clarity on that. We have asked for information on this within the budget workshop resolutions, but perhaps it is necessary for us just to highlight that. And then I do also think that I asked a question on the locust money, and I do believe that between the two treasuries and the two departments of agriculture, I think nationally it might be the department for agriculture, no, is it fisheries and forests, or is it agriculture land reform? I think it might be land reform. Okay. So that those four departments need to have a conversation with each other regarding how are we going to deal with the locust problem, because it's not just the problem for the Western Cape, it's a problem for, I think, it's the Northern Cape, Northwest, and the Eastern Cape as well. And I would like to request then that is also a resolution. Any other views? Okay, colleagues, then Member Brankhuis, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. So yes, in terms of resolutions to Treasury, like I said earlier, we would like to see that Treasury comes up with more mechanisms so that oversight can be sharpened, especially in those areas around the country, and especially in the Western Cape, where the inequality is thriving and it is spreading like a wildfire. So yeah, that is my resolution, and I would like to add also that I'm in support of this bill, and but Treasury should come up with better mechanisms to play a more effective oversight role. Yes, thank you very much, sir.
I'm not sure which mechanisms you would like National Treasury to play to sharpen the oversight mechanisms, because as a member of parliament, we are supposed to do the oversight.
Yeah, yes, thank you very much for adding that. Yes, together with national, provincial treasury also, and all spheres of government should collaborate and come together and actually, like you said, what they call it, play a more effective role. Come up with ideas and come up with mechanisms. We are open for discussions, you know, so that we can see the difference being made here on the ground. So yes, I'll conclude.
Can I suggest that we phrase it that we request for National Treasury to indicate the different mechanism of oversight that it has over how money is spent in order to address inequality within provinces and municipalities. Would you be in order with that?
Very much, Chair. Thank you very much. Very much.
Okay. Member Bosman, Member Brankhuis, I'm just going to lower your hand.
No, thank you, Chairperson. I'm covered. I was just slightly confused by the first drafting of the resolution because it would be rather hypocritical for us to ask the Treasury to do oversight when that's our job, and that's why we're having this meeting. But although I don't agree that the resolution as amended should be asked to Treasury, because I think the Constitution as well as the pieces of legislation clearly outlines what oversight mechanisms the Treasury has. So maybe what the committee should resolve is to get copies of those legislation to members, especially members who don't understand what those mechanisms are. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we have another amendment that is being proposed. Colleagues, the proposal then is that we then request from WCBP for us to then get the respective legislative documentation. I do know, for example, JITA and LexisNexis and Butterwords, all of those type of organizations have the little law booklets when it comes to things like finance and budgeting and things like that. So, Member Brunkhuis, are you happy with the amendment regarding the oversight mechanisms?
In order, Chair, in order. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. We will then put that as a resolution as well. Colleagues, any other hands for views before I ask the views on the bill? I know Member Brunkhuis has already indicated his view. Okay, colleagues, I will now take views on the bill regarding the negotiating mandate.
Thank you, Chair. I said we do not support the bill.
Thank you so much. Any other members would like to put now? Member Bosman?
Yeah, I want to second Member Mackenzie's proposal that we do not support the bill.
Thank you so much. Member Brunkhuis, is this in addition to what you've indicated previously?
Yes, Chair. Al-Jama is in support of the bill, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any other views? Okay, I don't see any other hands. So, Member Mackenzie, what we're going to do then is we're going to take the references to a political party then out of the document. We will then include the views in the resolutions that we've now put here. Ms. Kamish Ahmad, could you just put the negotiating mandate format up then for me so that we can edit the information? And just for the record, I also am not in support of this bill for the reasons Member Mackenzie has put out previously.
Okay, we're going to have to merge that document, but Lizette can just put the template up quickly.
That's fine. We have in the past been able to merge the documentation. We just ask that the references to political parties are then excluded, and then you write those particular sentences where we make those submissions then in neutral format. Okay, so let us just deal with the first page, which will be part of the negotiating mandate. Okay, so yes, report. So then we will take the to support out. And then we'll include a minority view. Oh, you don't have to copy and paste. We can just quickly type it, minority view. Bold that, and then in the next sentence.
Is it? I typed it out on the chat.
Thank you so much. Would you like me to read it out? Ms. Kluter? In terms of Standing Rule 90?
Yeah, fine. I'm just pasting it from the chat.
No problem.
Sorry. There. Okay.
And just the word in front of terms. You support it. Perfect. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'm now going to read it out, and then I'm going to ask whether this is a correct reflection of the views that have been put. Negotiating mandate. Sorry, can you just go a little bit more up? Negotiating mandate stage, report of the Budget Committee on the Division of Revenue Bill B6 2022 NCOP dated 22 April 2022 as follows. The Budget Committee, having considered the subject of the Division of Revenue Bill B6 2022 NCOP, referred to it in accordance with Standing Rule 217, confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the NCOP the authority to not support the bill. Minority view in terms of Standing Rule 90, the Al-Jamaa expressed its minority view to support the bill. And then it's just my signature at the end. And then we will attach the reasons with the information then attached, and we will also then put our resolutions in the in our minutes. Are you going to paste the following reasons in?
Yeah, I just want to, so that we are, sorry, through Chairperson, through you, that we are aware that we are going to give the reasons for not supporting the bill below, so that we adopt it in this manner.
Okay, can we perhaps, instead of saying for the following reasons, can we write the reasons for the reasons attached? Okay. Colleagues, if I could please now get hands for whether you believe this is a correct.
This is a correct reflection. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could get a seconder. Colleagues, are there a seconder for the report?
I second the Chairperson.
Thank you so much. I hope that people in Budget Committee are not too distracted by the other engagements in the province today. Thank you so much. The report also adopted. We have one set of minutes. Thank you, members, for engagement on this front. We have one set of minutes that needs to be considered. Ms. Kalmish Ahmed, if we can put that up, please. Okay, let's go to page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Okay, just 2 pages. Okay, colleagues.
Chairperson,
Can we just change quickly? Apologies at the end there. We are at 2022. I saw a date there, 2022, not 2021. There we go. Colleagues, okay, is that, if we got to get a move and a seconder for the minutes?
I move, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. Can I get a seconder for the minutes?
I second, Chairperson.
Thank you so much. The minutes are so adopted. Ms. Kalmish Ahmed, you have taken note of the respective resolutions that we've asked?
Okay, yes, I have. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, colleagues. With no further ado, the meeting is thus adjourned. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.